Hello, everyone. So today we're going to talk about the factors that affect urban economic activity. Last class we talked about residential. Today we're going to be talking about where things happen within cities in terms of making money or the economy in general. So before we get into the full content that we're going to be talking about today, I just want to make sure that for part one, we have gone through and we've answered the questions from part one using chapter excerpt 1B. That should be done before you start on this part of the slideshow. So in terms of urban growth and economic development, there's a really clear connection, a really clear correlation between urban growth and economic development. And if we think about the DTM, this makes a lot of sense, right? As urban growth occurs, that usually means that a country is industrializing, that they are developing, that they are growing economically and making more money. And so as a city grows, usually that follows with it economic development within the country. So one does not necessarily lead to the other. However, there is a connection between those two things. So in terms of levels of development, these are normally measured in terms of gross national product per capita, um, but also in terms of gross domestic product per capita as well. And a lot of this is tied into some of the very important functions that a city holds in terms of the process of development within a country. So for one, you have commercial, factors or functions. They provide the market, they provide the exchange centers that are necessary for the conversion from a subsistence farming economy within a country to a more advanced economy. You also have industrial. This could provide a huge stimulus, a huge amount of growth for development because the larger the town, the better it is for skilled and unskilled labor, the more capital in terms of human capital it has because there are more people living there. But also politically, towns can provide a focus for nationalist feeling. It can also allow for ethnic, tribal, or religious integration. Just think about how we think about New York City within our own country, right? A lot of our feelings about this idea of a melting pot where people assimilate to our country are tied into the idea that people came to New York City and were able to experience American culture and provide that sense of liberty that coming to the United States is assumed to bring. You also have administrative tasks because they provide these towns provide economies of scale for health and education, and then socially as well. Intermixing of classes, of people, of different people from different backgrounds, all of which are a function of a city. Now, in terms of thinking back on not just development, but economic development, there are some models and theories that we're going to talk about today that help to explain where things are located within a city, whether it be residential, whether it be commercial or retail, and then industrial as well. So the bid rent theory is one of those theories that we're going to be talking about. The bid rent theory says that the land at city center is most expensive for a couple different reasons. For one, it's the land most accessible to public transportation because it's in the middle. And so this leads to more potential customers, more money in return. There's also a small amount of land available in this area. And so supply and demand sort of keep the prices high on that particular land. And so different land uses are going to compete for this land in order to maximize their profits. If you're in a low profit sort of business, you're probably not going to choose land at city center because you would be paying the most amount in terms of your rent, your lease, whatever have you, and not being able to make a ton of money. So from the city center, you start to see land that generally decreases in prices because it is further away from those major routes. The only way that it sort of spikes again in terms of price, the further from city center you are, is through when they are along major intersections. And this is where land prices rise again. So if you think about like Tyson's Corner, This is at the intersection of the the Dulles Toll Road access, as well as Highway 495. And so those two major routes leading into DC and away from DC mean that the price of that land tends to go up. And that's why you see like so many skyscrapers in that area. Now, at the city center is oftentimes the central business district. And as you guys have seen in the first couple of lessons, this is an extremely, extremely important area of the city. It becomes the economic and commercial core of a city. It provides the following for each city that it's in. So for one, it's the heart of the city. It's also the area that's most accessible to public transportation. So just going back to the bid rent theory, it's very expensive for that reason. And because of that, it becomes the location with the highest land values. And so it features a lot of clustering of similar types of businesses, including like real estate businesses or financial markets. It's the sort of businesses that are on like the Fortune 500 companies list within a city. And so very, very high level, usually white collar workers who are working in offices. Big corporations tend to be in this central business district. And this sort of bears out when you look at a lot of these different types of urban land use models. The first one we're going to talk about here is the Burgess zone model, which is on the left. This sort of spans out circularly from the city center. And so in the city center, you see central business district. From there, you see light manufacturing. Outside of that, you sort of get low-class residential, and then from there, medium-class housing, and finally, high-class residential on the outside. Now, there are a lot of wealthy people who live in the inner city, so sometimes this doesn't necessarily always mesh with how the city is laid out. And that's why you get things like the Hoyt sector model. And so it's not circular in nature or spanning out from there almost like a bullseye, but there are sectors that come off of that central business district that, like the Burgess zone model, is right there in the middle. And then as far as like just sort of straight lines from there, you get the inner city wholesale light manufacturing as well as low class residential, and then medium class housing, and touching the city center as well is that high class residential that sort of spans out directly from the city center. Now, another thing that is competing for land within these cities are industrial activity, and that includes manufacturing. So cities are oftentimes the largest manufacturing centers in a nation, and this is especially true for world capitals. So places like Moscow or Paris or even London are huge manufacturing centers for their particular country. Not so much London because there are other cities within England that carry out this task as well, but Moscow and Paris in particular. They're very large markets. Port cities that are on the coast in particular have excellent access to international markets. And they're also major centers of innovation, ideas, fashion. And so because of all of this, they attract a lot of different people. And so a variety of different types of labor, both skilled and unskilled, are available to cities. And so that becomes a very important place for industrial activity. So usually you're going to find industrial activity within a city very close to a couple different things. One, you want to have inner cities that are close to railroads or canals so that they can easily transport those goods that are being made at these factories. You also have docks. You want sites close to airports, so again, they can be transferred out of this area. And then also you want sites that are away from residential locations because oftentimes they emit a lot of pollutants in the air, and so you don't want homes near them. The people who would live closest to these industrial areas would be the people that would work there, and usually that tends to be lower class housing just because of the type of pay that industrial workers get. Industries also found in cities on top of where they're located. including those that need skilled labor like medical instruments, those that need access to the CBD, central business district, like fashion accessories, clothing, things that would be tied to those industries, and then areas that need whole urban markets for distribution. So like newspapers. Oftentimes you'll find those fairly close so that the papers that are made every single day can be given out to people very quickly. Now, in terms of retail land use, so where people go to buy goods, there's a couple different hierarchies, and so you're going to find different types of retail businesses in different places. So, for instance, low order goods, which we talked about a couple classes ago, those are going to be concentrated in neighborhood stores and shopping plazas. You want these close to residential areas because they include things like bread, milk, eggs, things that people are going to need to buy on a very regular basis. High order goods, these tend to be in department stores, so bigger retail centers, main street shops, so right there in downtown areas, along major intersections. These sort of places are things that people don't buy as much, and so you want them in areas where, when people are walking around city center, more people can get to them. And then the third thing would be out-of-town superstores and big shopping centers, and this has become increasingly popular in suburban areas. So you have places like Reston Town Center or Mosaic District where you're trying to bring a little bit of that urban flavor in addition to being big shopping centers for people to easily access, be able to kill several birds with one stone, so to speak, and get all of their errands done at one location or as few locations as possible. So types of retail use, types of retail stores include central shopping areas like I talked about with Mosaic District or Reston Town Center, department stores, chain stores, specialist shops, restaurants, pedestrianized malls. All of these are part of these central shopping areas. But you also have shopping plazas, which are smaller. These are a cluster of shops, usually including a small supermarket, news agents, other low order outlets that serve nearby residential outlets. So over here in Burke, you have where the Walmart is. There's several other like smaller restaurants that are right there, different shops that serve those purposes. And then you also have superstores. So these are large outlets that are close to residential areas with huge amounts of shopping space, ample parking, good road access. And this is oftentimes becoming where you will see these retail parks. And this is when hardware, electrical, furniture superstores, other superstores are sort of close together so that people, again, do not have to travel as far. So if I'm going to Walmart, usually there's a Lowe's or a Home Depot near it because you're buying things for the home. So just in case you need an additional thing that Walmart would not have in terms of hardware or something like that, you might pop over to Lowe's or Home Depot, and it's very convenient for those stores to be near each other. Or vice versa, I'm shopping at Lowe's, I'm doing some home projects, maybe I need something from Walmart or Target that would help in terms of decorating that space. Now, there's a few different factors that are helping to shape changes in shopping habits. And one of these, a lot of these are tied to sort of technological changes that are taking place, including the internet. So some of them that we're going to talk about here that are leading to people shopping less frequently in terms of like brick and mortar stores or physical stores. One are demographic changes, falling population growth, smaller households, more elderly people who don't get out as much. All of these are changing shopping habits. But you also have suburbanization that are moving people outside of city centers, and then more affluent households that are not necessarily shopping at some of these types of stores as often. You also have technological changes like I talked about. The internet changing things. People are buying things less from physical stores and more from the internet. But also people doing things like owning deep freezers and going to places like Costco where they can buy more things. They don't have to go out shopping as much. They can save more food at home, and so they don't have to, sort of go out as quickly. But there's a couple other ones. One is economic change. The increased standard of living has allowed more people to own cars, live further away from shopping centers, and maybe they don't go as often. They may have, there may be some more congestion and inflated land prices in city center, making it much more hard for people to go out and buy these sort of goods. The increased availability of suburban sites, like we talked about, and then social changes like more women in paid work who don't necessarily have the time during the day to go out and buy goods. All right, the last thing that we're going to, concept that we're going to talk about here are informal economic activities. And the informal economy is a little bit different than the formal economy that we've been talking about for most of this time. So the formal economy usually involves offices, factories, commercial buildings where, sort of businesses that, in ideal terms, pay a lot of taxes, and are sort of by the book in terms of businesses. But you also have an informal economy, and this includes a lot of different service positions like servants, gardeners, maids, cleaners, taxi drivers, people that are selling goods on the street out of like food trucks or sidewalk stands. Sort of be thinking about like included in this like the people who are selling like knockoff purses on the street. This is all part of the informal economy. Bands that are doing gigs at bars or restaurants. This is all part of the informal economy. And the informal economy is small scale, it's locally owned, it's labor intensive, and individuals could be part of both at the same time. So if you hired me for tutoring, that would make me part of the informal economy, where I am part of the formal economy or civil service as a teacher, but then I also make money on the side tutoring people a little bit off the beaten path. So in terms of the informal economy, you have two different types. The first one is the bazaar economy. So this is small trade, service establishments, craft workshops. Oftentimes this includes families who are employing their children, employing the elderly to sort of make things. It's like a farming-like organization where they're making their goods themselves and then selling it on the street. I see a lot of stands where people are selling like mangoes that they cut up, and they sell them in these like containers and stuff like that so that you can buy cheap produce. They also produce cheap goods and services for low-income households. There's generally a lot of competition because a lot of different people are making the same things, and so this keeps prices low. And so in urban areas, these are incredibly huge amounts of the population. It can be up to 45% of employment in a city, especially in low-income countries where this is more popular. But then you also have street economy, where you have like people who are selling street things on the street, like those knockoff purses, shoe shiners, beggars, thieves, are all part of this street economy. And it's all not all negative, but you tend to have more sort of elements that are a little bit off the beaten path. This can be up to 40% of the labor force within a city, and again, more popular in low-income countries. And the earnings and standards of living are pretty low in those as well. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of exploitation that goes on within the informal sector. So even though a lot of geographers look at the informal sector as a valuable way of sort of making money when you might not be able to participate in the formal economy and get a job by whatever means necessary, unfortunately, there's others that argue that it does lead to more exploitation by the poor, of the poor by the rich. And this can take place in a couple different ways. One, entrepreneurs, so the rich own the equipment or the capital necessary for the operation of a business. These are often wealthy people working in the formal sector who are then renting out whatever they own to people in the informal sector. The informal sector does benefit those in the formal sector because it keeps prices low, and so people do benefit from it. But it also reduces the price that those in regular employment have to pay for their goods, and it also decreases the profits that informal sector employees make. All right, so with that, we've covered all of the basics of the the economic activities of a city, including the informal economy. If you have any questions, let me know, and have a great day.